I believe that one case, the right case, can change the world. If you believe this too, Freedom Counsel is for you. Pursuing a major case can be overwhelming, but we provide a community of practice so that you have the resources available to support your case. My name is Warner Mendenhall, and we are Freedom Counsel. Join Freedom Counsel today. freedomcounsel.org.
I knew as early as February 2020 that I needed to do something.
I recognized that there was a systematic problem and that this was not about hydroxychloroquine, it was something larger.
Fear shut the world down, and people made a lot of money at it as they were killing us.
I was asked to speak at a freedom rally that was set up to discredit my reputation.
Whoever orchestrated this must not have the safety of this nation in mind.
Medicine and politics should be separated. These doctors were handcuffed.
The American public has awakened. We have a new civil rights movement to restore our rights, and we're going to hold them accountable.
It is a natural progression of a man of God or woman of character to see injustice, to seek it out, and then to act upon it.
Do you hear me? We will never lock down again. This is the hill we die on.
Don't miss New American Heroes with attorney Warner Mendenhall and John Davidson, Mondays on BrokenTruth.tv.
Oh, it's Broken Truth, and I had my mute on. Today, I am joined by Jennifer Kennedy, Esquire, who is standing in for the lovely and talented Warner Mendenhall, who is unfortunately in court fighting for your rights today. But luckily for us, we have Jennifer, who is also equally lovely and talented. Or is it talented and lovely? Which should I do?
Thank you, sir. I will take it either way. I appreciate it. And, I would say, fortunately, Warner Mendenhall is in court today because he is absolutely working on all our behalf.
Right.
Happy to be here in his stead today.
So today we have a really excellent show. It's going to be with Rick Jaffe, Esquire, who has a lawsuit against the CDC for its, vaccine schedule that was apparently completely illegal for the last, 30, 40 years. Let's go ahead and get Rick in here. Rick, how are you, sir?
Good. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for being here. Rick, can you kind of give us a top level view of your case? I know it's been covered in a lot of places, but my audience is maybe a little different for the common folk.
Well, I think the most important point is the combination vaccine schedule, which is recommended by the CDC. And most people they might not even believe me. My family didn't believe me when I told them this. The entire schedule has never been tested together to see whether it's safe and whether it does more good than harm as a schedule. So in most states, you have 20, 30, 40 shots, 30, 40, 50, 60 antigens over a period of 18 years, starting in day one. And while they do safety testing for each vaccine individually, up to 5 days, up to 7 days, up to a week, the schedule itself has never been tested. So that's fact number one. Fact number two is that the federal government has an outside scientific advisor. It used to be called the Institute of Medicine. Now it's called the National Institute of Medicine or something like that.
Oh, yeah. It's the other way around. National Academy of Medicine. And now it's the Institute of Medicine. Yep.
Right. So they, since 2002 and then in 12, have literally pointed out that there never been these studies, observational studies, or any studies testing the whole schedule. And they recommended that it be tested. And that's the government's own advisors. So when you take these two facts together, right, which most people don't know, it seems to me the obvious conclusion is that, and since the vaccine schedule of the CDC is largely used by all the states for their state mandates, and their contraindications and precautions list are used as for deciding medical exemptions, which are very, very limited. The conclusion to me is that they haven't done their job. They need to test the entire schedule for safety. And since they haven't done it, then what results from that? Well, what results from that is the CDC has two categories of, call them recommendations. Category A is essentially a recommendation, full-on recommendation, and pretty much all the vaccines for kids or all vaccines are category A, full recommendation. They have another category, category B, which is shared decision-making, which is essentially informed consent. You talk to your doctor and the family and the doctor decides. That's essentially what happens in many European countries, England, Japan. They don't have compelled vaccination. They have informed consent, shared, in effect, shared decision-making. So the basis of this lawsuit are these facts and saying that until such time as the entire schedule is tested, like the Institute of Medicine says it should be, the court or HHS on its own should order that all childhood vaccines be switched to shared decision-making. And if they think the schedule is safe, fine, let them prove it. And that, in a nutshell, is what we're asking to do.
So Rick, I just want to be clear. When you say the schedule, what you mean is the combination of all 72 shots in the course of a child's, early life, right? Like polypharmacy, like when you use Tylenol with a couple of shots of whiskey, it might damage your liver. If they're not testing for those combination complications, is that what you mean?
Exactly. I mean, they test each vaccine. The FDA, in order to get approval, has to test each vaccine individually. And it's another story.
I was just going to say, Rick, that's another story, right? In and of itself.
It's another story about the fact they don't do placebo-controlled trials. They don't test for a long period of time. And the big thing, which we mentioned in the lawsuit, is that the entire vaccine safety monitoring system is broken, as the HHS has admitted, because the VAERS system was never geared to test for causation, and this the VSD system doesn't really work. So the other part of this is that the government acknowledges that the system for monitoring side effects and the safety of vaccines is broken and doesn't do the job. So when you add that to the picture, I mean, to a layman, look, I'm just a lawyer, but I mean, how can this be? And I think that people don't really understand that. And that one of the purposes of this lawsuit, in addition to, holding HHS's feet to the fire, is to have the public become aware of these facts. Because I think even if you're pro-vaccine, I mean, you have to believe that, the combination should be tested. They do that in cancer when each individual cancer drug might be approved, but then you have what's called studies that test the combination. And you have to go through an IRB and all that. EPA tests combinations of toxins. I mean, they do it all the time. The only people who don't test combinations of their products are basically the CDC and for the vaccine manufacturers. And for the life of me, I can't figure out why that's the case.
It might be money. There might always be money at the under that. Rick, tell us about your lawsuit, the fact that what you are seeking, there's two things. It's for declaratory relief and injunctive relief. So tell us exactly what you hope the court is going to order here.
Well, this is both a administrative law case and a constitutional law case, but it's predicated on administrative law. Federal governments in general are held to sort of a high standard. You have to show that their action is arbitrary and capricious, right? I mean, they get some deference, perhaps less so for the lawyers involved now, because of Chevron deference is lessened now. But by and large, you have a pretty high standard to show that the government is acting badly, and that's arbitrary and capricious. And one way to show that is that that the government in its decision has not considered an important factor to a problem. So we're saying, it's pretty important to see whether you give 72 different antigens, dozens of doses over a period of 18 years. It's pretty important to know whether the sum total of that is safe. And we don't really know that. I mean, the vaccinologists say they know it, but they've never tested it. So we want a declaration that that the schedule itself, the promotion of the schedule as recommended, is arbitrary and capricious. And we want a court to order that until such time as these safety studies are done, that the HHS CDC has to move all of the childhood vaccines on the CDC schedule, ACIP schedule, from recommended to shared decision-making, i.e. informed consent. That's the goal of the lawsuit.
And this is a great point again to make about the fact that the CDC schedule is considered recommendations to each state. But the states pretty much grab that schedule and then they turn around and codify it. And they put it into their own required schedule for school entry, for example.
Right.
So you have states that are picking and choosing among all those different recommended vaccinations and shots and choosing, like in California, we have our 10 immunizations that if you don't have all of them, of course, California has no functional exemptions. If you don't have those, you're not getting into a pre-K or kindergarten. And so how can they require these of children if they're not even safety tested, not sufficiently individually, and certainly not that entire recommended schedule? So this is a bombshell lawsuit, Rick, wouldn't you say? It's not been attempted before.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty big. I mean, it could have some major downstream implications. So, like, for example, New York flat out says that it's using the CDC's recommendations as the basis of their mandate schedule, and pretty much every state. I think Colorado is the only state that may use something else like AAP, but pretty much most states rely on the CDC, and that may change. I mean, I think what I'm hearing is that the regions are starting to create or think about creating some alternative schedule, but that's where it gets really, really interesting. I don't know if you all saw Robert F. Kennedy's tweet last week in response to the AAP saying that they're going to they've now recommended the COVID shot for kids, which, by the way, I've already dealt with in the Cardenas lawsuit, which was the precursor to this Thomas lawsuit, which we can talk about. But to stick to the point, Kennedy last week basically threatened the AAP, pharma, and the vaccine pushers, the pediatricians, that sure, you could follow AAP's recommendations, but if you do, you're going to lose your immunity from liability. And that's going to be right. And that's going to be litigated hotly. There are already pushback about that, of whether it's going to happen. But I think the genius of what Kennedy did is he put it out there. He put it out there, and people are going to be talking about it, because the other main thing that people have been talking about for decades is getting rid of this immunity. So, and I have to say, I have my moments, but I never thought about that, to be honest. I mean, the notion, I got the mandate point, but I didn't get the point about that that the manufacturers and that the doctors might be able to be sued if they just followed the CDC does what we ask voluntarily or by court order, and two, they follow AAP's recommendations. Now, whether or not those suits win or not is interesting, but as a litigator, Jennifer, you can tell me, if there's me, you, and 100 or 200 of our best friends, right, suing the what out of pediatricians, pharma on all these things, well, I mean, they might not like that, and they might think more carefully about the conditions under which they're not going to recommend, an infant get 4 shots or 3 shots every 2 months.
Right.
So that to me, when Kennedy did that made the connection. And like I say, that's an uphill battle, but that's something that they're going to have to take note of, even though mainstream media isn't talking about it. So there's going to be a response. HHS is going to have a response to this, right? And it's going to be whatever it's going to be. We need more time to think about it. But, at some point, they're going to respond, and they're going to have to answer a simple question. Have you studied it or haven't you?
Right.
I mean, we know they haven't. And I think that's the reason the media is not covering this case, because then they'd have to cover the fact that the schedule has never been tested together. And I don't think they want to, I don't think they want to acknowledge that, for the obvious reason that even if you're in favor of vaccines, it's new information and it might cause you to be a little skeptical.
That's right. And the powers that be, they hate that skepticism, right? They hate anybody doing their own research and thinking for themselves about what the science means to them. And that's what parents do for their kids. Parents are trying to find out what is the best thing for their family, what is the best thing for their child. And when you have the CDC pushing this list of injections that have not had safety testing done, you have to wonder, what is a parent supposed to do? You brought up a good point about the recommendation that I think you mentioned even in your complaint, that Dr. Paul Offit has opined that a baby could receive 10,000 antigens at once and still be safe. And yet we've got 72 doses on this shot, and that isn't even tested. So how does anyone get away with making these claims like that if they won't even do the basic research on this supposedly small number of shots?
Well, I think the short and poignant answer is, we're talking religion, not science, or religion mantled in the garb of science. This is not, I mean, he's the high priest. And I think there's nothing, the reason I put it in the complaint is there's nothing that embodies really the insanity of this whole program to come out and say that you can give 10,000 antigens. But, and here's the counterpoint, which I just saw on Facebook. You can give 10,000 antigens to a kid, but for an infant, only introduce one food at a time.
Exactly.
Because it's too dangerous. So right. I just saw that on Facebook. So it's just because what? Solid food is just too dangerous for an infant, but load them up with vaccines.
Right. And by the way, hey, hold off on that peanut butter until baby's about a year old. But hey, let's inject whole peanut proteins into the baby, right? In the vaccines, because those are elements of vaccines. And a lot of people don't know that. And it certainly isn't listed on those inserts if they're even given to the parent to read before injection.
Hey, another thing I just found out. Some of this stuff I know, but I'm a healthcare lawyer. So Sire J, is that his name? This guy Sire J, is
okay.
He just laid on me this concept of, I didn't know the CDC has a foundation. Maybe you know more about that than me. So and it's supported by like pharma and the vaccine makers or something. I mean, that's news to me. Didn't make it in the complaint, might make it in the amended complaint, but that to me is appalling.
Yeah, when in the history of the world was it ever a good idea to have nonprofit entities organized by government agencies?
Right.
That happens. It's curious. I mean, because one of the things we did in investigating CDC Foundation was, I believe they were one of the donors to a group called Public Good Projects, which managed a Facebook group called Shots Heard Around the World, which was one of the vehicles used to stage mass reporting of medical licenses for any doctors that spoke out about vaccines, any doctors that spoke out about, early treatment options. This was how the attacks were coordinated against Dr. Mary Bowden in Houston, was through Shots Heard and other groups like it. So we had infiltrated, or we had members of the group sending us screen grabs of what was going on in there. And I've tracked some of the donations to that group from, I believe it was CDC Foundation. Because at first we were like, hey, the CDC, but it's CDC Foundation. NIH has a foundation too as well, I believe. It's an interesting thing when you have these organizations controlled on some level by a public agency that gets tax dollars, and then they're doing this other thing. How does that even work? How do we sue them to stop that?
Well, that's, since I heard about this only like 2 days ago, I mean, that's now on my radar screen. And, so the Cardenas lawsuit, which, just to remind you, that was a lawsuit that I filed in the end of April. And a lot of people have been talking about removing the COVID vaccine for kids from the recommended list because, well, how about the fact that it never showed any clinical benefit, right? And they approved it on the basis of a surrogate endpoint, increase in titers for kids. And how about the fact that the pandemic ended a couple of years. So even though it was only emergencies authorized, it was still recommended. So, I heard a lot of talk, but no action. So what we decided to do is there was a doctor who's they took away her medical practice because she wouldn't order the COVID vaccine.
And that was Dr. Cardenas, right?
Cardenas, right. So, yeah, she called me up, and the truth is I couldn't, I couldn't get her any money because of sovereign immunity, but she was a good sport, and she agreed to be a plaintiff in this case in order to try to change the policy. So, we filed that case the end of April, and we asked for two things. We asked that the CDC remove the shot for kids from recommended to shared decision making, and that we asked also that the VFC program stop requiring doctors to order the shot. So that was the end of April, and we asked that they do it before ACIP meeting in June, because I wanted the CDC just to take control and the point to show that ACIP, they're not going to follow just the recommendations of a bunch of just crazy vaccine fanatics. So what I didn't anticipate is that Kennedy was going to fire all of them. So I didn't anticipate that. But on the other hand, the end of May, he did in fact himself, or I think it was him, announced the change from recommended to shared decision making. And in July, what happened is the CDC came out with a new policy saying that because it's shared decision making, they're no longer requiring Medicaid physicians to order it. So, it's like in life or in sales, you make a sale, you sit down and shut up. So I got basically the two things I want. And let me be clear, I don't claim that RFK Jr. did this because of my lawsuit. I don't even claim that he knew anything about the lawsuit. But the bottom line is, whatever the reason, the result got achieved, and that's so I dismissed the case with prejudice, and that working on that case led me to what was sort of an obvious conclusion. Once I realized about the IOM, what they did, well, why not the whole schedule? And that is basically how I came up with the idea of this Thomas lawsuit. And, the one thing that I think may happen, I've done some of these kinds of cases before, maybe people will start coming out of the woodwork. It's already started to happen a little bit with Paul Thomas. So
tell us about Dr. Thomas, as a matter of fact. Tell us about your two plaintiffs in this action.
And before you go into that, I just want to point out that the CDC Foundation, I downloaded this grid over the weekend. It's from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They show all their grants. You can download this document. The CDC Foundation has received $208 million from the Gates Foundation. And then
really,
they use some of that money to then suppress anyone that discredits these untested vaccines.
and let me ask you, what is the? I mean, let's do some real-time thinking and analysis here. And what's the connection? What is the technical connection between the CDC Foundation and the CDC?
I don't necessarily know that, but I would assume that several of the people that run the CDC are also directly connected. Maybe they're board members. You know what? Let's look at the CDC Foundation board members. Why don't we?
But it's a separate nonprofit. It's not a subsidiary of the CDC. And is it at all affiliated with them?
The board, I can show you this. Let's see. David Aldridge, CDC Foundation Treasurer, Raymond Baxter, Kaiser Permanente, Blue Shield of California.
So these are just industry shills. So I don't get it. Are they? Is the CDC just renting out its name? What's the connection to the CDC? I mean, it's like a trademark, and they pay them money for the trademark. I mean, I don't understand.
Franchise.
Franchise. I like that.
Yeah, you know what? Let's ask Rock. How about that?
Yeah.
Sure.
You know, if there's $208 million going in from the Gates Foundation, that's not cheap.
Yeah, but I mean, how are they using the name CDC? I mean, isn't that like, trademark protected? I mean, I don't get it. So this is in real time. I mean, the answer is, you know what they sound like to me? A defendant.
And I just told you they have a thick wallet.
Right.
No, deep pockets right there.
Well, there's nothing to make a grown lawyer smile as much as those words, deep pockets.
It's the only entity authorized by Congress to raise private funds for the CDC's mission.
The only entity authorized by Congress to raise funds for the CDC's mission. Why?
Since 95, it's made over $2 billion.
Well,
raising funds.
It's a good it's a good racket if you can do it.
Right.
It works closely with the CDC, but it's not part of the federal government or the CDC itself.
Okay. All right.
Where it gets interesting is that that's a very blurry line, I think.
Let's get back to the lawsuit. I want to talk more about the specifics of the lawsuit because these are not blurry lines over here. I want to hear about Paul Thomas and Kenneth Stoller, your two individual plaintiffs. And then also you have an organizational plaintiff here, Stand for Health Freedom. So tell us a little bit about, number one, how we can support this litigation and support Stand for Health Freedom. And also, why are Dr. Thomas and Dr. Stoller your two plaintiffs?
Well, you can support the case. This case is, for better or worse, mostly for worse so far, community funded. So we have a link down below which you can donate for the case. It's an important case, and I felt like I was in a good position to do it because I've done a lot of vaccine medical exemption work, including for Ken Stoller. Thomas, to me, was the obvious lead plaintiff because he literally did the study which the IOM called to do. He did a study comparing an observational study of his practice of, I think, 3 or 10 or 15,000 patients, comparing fully vaccinated patients to semi-vaccinated to unvaccinated patients. And I think he had, with Jack Weiler, James Lyons Weiler, some pretty simple metrics like who comes to the office for sore throats or things like that, not wellness visits. And his results were pretty dramatic. And he concluded that the observational study showed that basically the more vaccinated you are, the sicker you are, the sicker the kids are. I mean, which is, unless your religion is vaccines, it's not crazy to think that a vaccine basically tries to trick the immune system into thinking that it's been that it's received this antigen, right? And it's not, on the most broad level, it's not crazy to think that when you mess with the immune system, you're going to have a reaction and you're going to have immune problems, right? Immunological problems, which is what happened in kids. So just on this basic common sense conceptual level, you can kind of see how that happens. So he did the study that showed it, and just one study, and then perhaps by coincidence, 5 days after he did the study, the Oregon Medical Board suspended his license because they found he was a danger to the public. So, causal connection, maybe it was an accident, but 5 days after he published the study, and then of course the way it works and what I described in the complaint is that the attack dogs came after him, and then without even talking to the authors, the journal pulled the study 7 or 8 months later. So he eventually gave up his license, and he had all these lawsuits and all this, which you can't fight City Hall. Not if they're going to do what they're going to do. And then he tried to sue them all personally, but you can't do collateral attack. And I've known the guy for a while, and for a while he wanted me to help him out. And I said, "There's nothing I can do for you now." So in my mind, I thought the guy was a hero, and I hoped that one of these days I was going to be able to do something for him. And because he's a hero. I mean, he did the study and paid the price for it. So that is why I put Paul Thomas as lead plaintiff in the case.
And we've seen those videos that he's done. We've seen the fact that, Health Freedom and parents across the country have been asking for this for a long time. Show us what the difference is between an unvaccinated child and a semi and a fully vaxxed child, because we predict that we're going to see a lot more illness in that latter category. And that's what he showed. Right. And for that, the state of Oregon says, "Oh, nope, you're done." Right.
And Stoller, Stoller had a similar issue where he was one of the only guys in California that tried to predict increased risk by genetic markers in admittedly a primitive way. But he'd look for, what are they called, alleles or something like that, deviations from genes, MTHR and all that, FLR, whatever it's called. And look for that. And because you have to do something, because and SB 277, as you know, this was the other big part of it. Pan and others specifically said that you could use exemption. You can do exemptions beyond the ACIP guidelines. So he looked at it and said, "Okay, well, I have a methodology, and he required everyone to have this 23andMe test. And he looked at the alleles, and he had certain basic categories, and he came up with this. Ended up doing a lot of these medical exemptions. He got some bad press about it. And then, as a side note, then the city of San Francisco tried to get all his medical records. And
you mean from his patients? All his patients' medical records?
That's right. They tried to get the city under a nuisance theory created by this San Francisco attorney, Doris Wright, or whatever her name is.
Oh, yeah.
So
we know her.
Dorit Rice.
Yeah. So she came up with this concept of nuisance. Right? She came up with the concept of nuisance. They created a public nuisance by having these exemptions. The city attorney bought it and then served a subpoena on him to get all his patient files. So I was his lawyer. So I ended up suing the city of San Francisco, and we did a pretty good fundraiser for him because he didn't have any money. And we eventually we settled the case. It was like sort of a draw. They withdrew the subpoena, and he agreed to get out of Dodge. Okay. And he moved to Santa Rosa,
to Santa Rosa. Okay, nearby.
Right, nearby. So that was the settlement. And sometimes, when you fight Goliath, take the draw. A draw is just as good as the W. So, and then, I did the board case, and I've had 4 license revocations. I'm a board lawyer, medical board lawyer, in 40 years. And his was one, and another doctor, same issue, was another. So I've had two in the last 5 years, and then one 10 years ago, and maybe one 20 years ago. So we did a whole trial on that. I think it was the first trial on medical exemptions, and they just basically said, no, you have to file ASIP. ASIP is the only thing you can consider in terms of medical exemptions, notwithstanding the language of SB 277 and notwithstanding the fact that Senator Pan says you can write exemptions anything you want.
Well, and remember, okay, so SB 277 in the state of California, for our non-Californians watching, SB 277 was then Senator Richard Pan's bill to eliminate completely our personal beliefs exemptions in the state. And personal beliefs is the umbrella for religious as well as philosophical, I just don't wanna. And he was successful, and he did that. And at that time, in 2015, in that session, he promised that medical exemptions were going to remain robust and inviolate. And then he lied. And in 2019, he came back and took them away with our SB 276, which drastically limited the exemptions that you could use medically to opt a child out of that schedule. And that's why we say in California, we have no functional exemptions, because he also introduced that witch hunting notion of hunting down the doctors who write the exemptions for their patients. And if they write greater than 5 in a calendar year, oh, there goes the red flag, and in come the authorities to do things like demand their records and take their license. California is one of 4 states right now that has literally no possibility of opting your child out of the schedule. And I know that California and those parents were all hoping that your lawsuit is going to shake up the CDC, number one, and potentially undermine this entire schedule, the way it's foisted onto the states.
Well, that's the hope.
You're in the DC circuit. Tell us about your chances. Tell us about what you think the odds are here.
Well, the judge is a female Democrat appointed by Biden in 2020. Smart woman, Harvard Law School.
You'll get a fair shake. That's good.
Harvard Law School, Harvard Law Review, cum laude graduate. So she's very, very smart. So, but look, the way I think this is going to play out, if you think about it strategically, and Jennifer, I'd like your thoughts on this too. Unlike a lot of my other cases, I did not and will not file a motion for preliminary injunction, because the chances of that are below zero, right? So what's going to happen? Well, I'll tell you what's going to happen. First thing, like in all these cases, I would imagine that the DDC U.S. Attorney's Office is going to request an extension of time, which they should. In any kind of big case like this, you need more time. Maybe they need a month, 2 months, whatever they want, fine with me. All right? Let them think about it. Let it mull it over. And then the CDC is going to have to do some very hard thinking, right? And normally what happens is the government would make a motion to dismiss. And to get in the weeds a little bit, and this is where it's going to get interesting. There's going to be 2 different kinds of bases for the motion to dismiss. You have collateral or jurisdictional issues like standing, which is a big one.
Yep.
And then you have substantive issues like what's called 12b-6, failure to state a claim. And this is maybe a little technical, but the bottom line is, let the CDC come and take the position to a federal judge that it's not important. It's not an important factor to test whether 72 medical interventions, right, which have side effects listed on their package inserts, that if you read them, you'll think you're going to drop dead from these shots, right? Just the side effects. Let them test. Let them say that it's not important that the schedule be tested together, or let us say it's unethical because we know it works. Let them put that position in writing, and then everyone in the country is going to know that they don't think it's important to test. Let them say that. So, so I have to speculate. Maybe this is a case where you don't make every argument you can make, because making that argument, they might even win on that. All right. And let a federal judge say, and let's go technical law, as a matter of law, right? Taking everything that's said in the complaint as true, right? That as a matter of law, it's not important to test whether these 72 medical interventions are safe. And if that's the position of the government, so be it.
And that's how they would win on a 12b6. That's how they would win theoretically and get the case dismissed, right?
Let them dismiss.
Let them say that.
Let them say that. And you know what? Now, the only interesting thing is, I think every Secretary of Health and Human Services, up until the present one, would go for that. But it just so happens,
right?
It just so happens that there's a guy in there now who might be worried about the government taking that position. What that does, what that means, I have no idea. But if there's one time in history to make that argument, that time be now.
It's now. It's totally now. With Bobby Kennedy at HHS, it's absolutely now. That was another question for you, Rick. Here we are kind of in the post-COVID era. And I would say before COVID, so many people were not at all awake to the whole notion of vaccination. Nobody was thinking about that. Right. I feel like COVID and the push for the COVID shots, et cetera, blew that open for a lot of parents and opened a lot of people's eyes. Do you think that now in society, it's that the societal push and awareness is also going to be helpful for your case?
Absolutely. I remember I gave a talk in 2019 at PIC, Physicians for Informed Consent. I think Kennedy might have even been there, but he went and left. And what I told these people back then is, look, 2019, a year before COVID, says you're not going to win on Jacobson. You're not going to change people's mind. What you're going to need is something big, some kind of pandemic where they'll try to do something and it's not going to work. And you need something game-changing of public perceptions. And, I think this is it. And I think more specifically, I think what's going to happen, in my view, and again, I am just a lawyer, and people, I think agree with me. I happen to think that the COVID shot, maybe not so much a Johnson & Johnson, but the other stuff, I think that's going to be in the next 5 or 10 years viewed as the biggest public health crisis since and greater than thalidomide, right? In terms of the effect. Yes. With the turbo cancers and all that people dropping dead. I think that's going to happen. And the first inkling of that, right? It's, of course you had Ed Dowd and all the people, the other guy.
Guide suddenly, exactly.
Yeah, Kieran, whatever his name is, the guy's doing all these studies, and McCullough just talked about the spike proteins that are around. That's exactly. The first inkling. But, and I think Kennedy is doing this intentionally. I don't know, but if I were him, this is what I would do. They just announced this committee with the MIT guy testing the toxicity, the true safety of the COVID shot. And my gut tells me as a lawyer, I've been a healthcare lawyer for 40 years. I have some background and I've seen policy change. I think it may even come out, it wouldn't shock me if the CDC hid some of this data because for the same reason they weren't going to test the vaccine schedule. I think they're afraid of what they're going to find out. So I think what they're going to be is a series of revelations about hiding the adverse data. And the system doesn't work anyway between VAERS and VSD. And I think it's probably going to be revealed they intentionally hid it. And then I think this guy is going to hold together all these different strands, the all-cause mortality death from Dodd, this guy, the genetic guy who's doing all this research, he's going to tie all that together, and he's going to tell a completely different picture. And the picture is going to be how the federal and state governments have basically misled the public.
Absolutely colluded.
Right? And once that comes out, then I think even people who are in favor of vaccines are going to demand more and a change.
And I think we're seeing it already when you see the deliberate suppression of the miscarriage data, for example, even in individual hospitals where they absolutely suppressed the fact that COVID vaccinated mothers were at an exponentially higher risk of miscarrying. That's already out. I mean,
that's my friend Greg Glazer's lawsuit with Street and Howard. Yeah. Now that's the thing I mean, and that's the beauty of that kind of lawsuit, because what happens is it's against, it just makes public what the hospitals have been suppressing. So the MIT guy is going to take that information and put all this stuff together, and you know, people who actually think, you know, you see all these strands and you know where it's going. Right. You know where it's going. It's just that nobody's put it all together. And I think this the panel, the ACIP panel is going to put it all together. And that plus the revelations. And I think, by the way, in my lawsuit, if we ever get to discovery, I think what's going to happen is the first thing we're going to ask for is internal communications with amongst the CDC to respond to and deal with the IOM's report in 2002 and 2012. I mean, what do they say? Because you know, they considered it and whether to do the testing. And I think, number one, they said they don't want to do testing because once you announce we're doing the testing, you undercut the concept that vaccines are safe and effective. And two, I'll bet there are 2 or 3 people in that community that said, you know, we've seen the SIDS data, we've seen, you know, and the other frame is the Peter Abbey work in Africa, which showed, you know, that the vaccine DPT might work, whatever the vaccine he tested, but it all caused mortality increased. So, you know, people, they're not all, some people inside had to realize that if they do the studies, it might not show what they want it to show. And man, that would be the smoking gun. So my cases, I always look for the smoking gun. So if there's anybody out there that was part of that discussion back in 2002 or 2012, you know,
when the IOM was calling for these studies, they were, this is over 20 years ago that they were saying, we really need to do these safety studies. And then there were crickets. And
there in government, there's a process. They don't let this stuff lie. There's back and forth. There's committees. There's communications. Exactly. And they have a policy. So that is the number one thing I would try to get in discovery, because you know, just with common sense, there are people that understood the problem that not testing was going to do. And that is literally the first thing I'm going to ask for if we get to go discovery.
And you have a couple of hurdles just for the lay people. You just filed this on August 15th. And as you said, you're not going to go for the preliminary injunction because that is a really hard standard to meet. And so now they're going to ask for an extension of time to do whatever it is they're going to do, come in and attack your complaint. So we're still looking at 30, 60 days out, even before maybe the government responds in any way.
Right. And like I say, I mean, they can do some interim things. I mean, wouldn't it be interesting if, for example, ACIP had a special meeting, not on the case, but on the issue, right? And deliberate whether they should do the testing, and let them bring all these brilliant ID doctors that talk about how unethical it would be to test things we know that work, and one food at a time, but 72 shots, fine. Let them say that in public and see what the public reaction. So frankly, And for what it's worth, in case there are any assistant U.S. attorneys in the District of Columbia, on the case thinking about it, I mean, if you want to present that information, if you want to have this kind of a conference with the ACIP, they'll bring Paul Offit and he'll talk about that he was wrong, that it's really 20,000 antigens you can do, not 10 or 50,000. Have at it. And I mean, let's see what the public thinks about it, right? And they'll just say, well, it's dangerous, it's horrible. And then we have the backdrop of the fact that in Europe, in a lot of places, they have shared decision making anyway. And by the way, am I wrong, or is America the only country where they have immunity from liability? I mean, I think it's one of the few.
I think it has to be the only one. And
Right,
in fact, and you're talking about the 1986 immunity, the deal that was cut, that Congress told Reagan, here's what we're going to do. We're going to create this National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act. Injury is in the name of the act.
Right.
And we're going to create that act and create the VAERS system. And we're taking all litigation against manufacturers away, giving blanket immunity to the manufacturers, and anybody injured, we're going to push over here into this special other court system for relief. That's the immunity there that many people are now aware of, that before COVID had no idea about that immunity shield. Any other instance like product liability, Ford and the Pinto, et cetera, you've got liability for that damaging product, but not with these irreversible injections.
Well, because vaccines are special. They're in a special category because the world needs them. So the bottom of what you have is the United States, I think, has about the most aggressive, or the CDC has the most aggressive vaccine schedule in the world, I think, but there's no immunity. So you have this, and whereas most other places don't have immunity, and at least in some European countries, they have shared decision making. So, I mean, why are we so special? I mean, it's kind of like, it's the same question in a way. Why do we pay the most expensive prices for drugs, where the same drugs are half, the price, or much cheaper in other places? So, it's like, let's not be that special. Let's do what a lot of the other countries do.
Right.
So that's the other point. I mean, it's perspective. I mean, it's part of the marketing arm and just the PR campaign and the brainwashing that, it has to be mandated, and you have to have immunity, except that's just America, because we're too stupid, or we're too litigious.
Or there's too much money.
I don't know what it is, but we're special.
Hey, I just found something interesting. Totally coincidental, as everything is. The Iran-Contra scandal began to be reported on November 3rd, 1986.
1986.
Guess when the vaccine manufacturer immunity law was signed?
1986.
November 14th. 11 days later.
What on earth? That is
like almost like wagging the dog, right?
Interesting.
Right.
Now, here's the interesting thing, though. Reagan was promised. What was the part of that deal? The deal was, what's the government going to do, President? We're going to do safety studies. We are going to ensure that we look at the manufacture of vaccines and make sure that we're constantly improving that process. And I believe it was Aaron Siri and ICANN that came in a couple of years ago and did a FOIA request saying, hey, government, 30 years of safety studies that were promised back in 1986. Could you produce those, please? Records request. And the answer they finally got was, we have no such documents that are responsive to that request. 30 years of safety studies, Zippo.
Right. And then, of course, you have Ray Flores' lawsuit, which said, do the studies, which was granted. I mean, and then we referenced that lawsuit in our case. So Flores is a hero. I mean, he's done something that nobody's actually done. He actually got the government to do work. So he's the number one hero in my book.
Thank you to Ray Flores. Absolutely.
Thank you to Ray Flores.
American hero.
Yeah, there's a funny ACIP being, the CDC's vaccine advisory group. I just did a story last Friday about, this is just how incestuously small this world is. But I have a FOIA request or public records request out to the University of Washington for a woman named Helen Chu. She was the person who invented her own COVID test and diagnosed all the first cases of COVID in the United States in Seattle against the CDC's wishes, they say. And I wanted all her emails between Gates Foundation and her address at University of Washington. They've now taken 7 months and they keep delaying because they want to alert third parties to their exposure. This same Helen Chu was on ASIP and was just kicked off of ASIP by HHS. And another interesting thing about it was she's also the same researcher that changed the endpoint of the remdesivir study for Fauci in April and May of 2020 to time to recovery instead of mortality. So this same person created the tests that help us diagnose all these early cases, then immediately took all those early cases and rolled them into remdesivir because remdesivir was being tested right out of the gate. And then used that diagnosis data to create what we considered to be the COVID progression of disease, which was a lot worse and more deadly than it actually turns out to be if you treat it properly. And now she's also advising on vaccines. But when she gets kicked out of the CDC ASIP group, what does she say? Scientific expertise is no longer of use. So fun stuff.
You know, and speaking of that, scientific expertise is no longer of use. That makes me think about the Ninth Circuit's recent ruling about Jacobson. Rick, I'm sure you heard this one, where on an en banc panel, they basically came in and said that it was okay for LA Unified School District to mandate the product, the shots that didn't prevent infection or transmission, that it was okay to mandate under Jacobson, whether it worked or not. That as long as the mandators, as long as the government felt it might be good for a person, not the group, not public health, but that it might be good for a particular individual, that's okay. And you are okay to mandate that product. And they're saying this is what Jacobson says. And I think it's high time for Jacobson to be under scrutiny at the Supreme Court myself.
Can you give a quick explanation of Jacobson for the plebeians?
Well, so Rick, you want to do Jacobson?
No, you're doing it. I mean,
Okay.
you go for it.
Okay. Jacobson v. Massachusetts, 1905. Dr. Jacobson objects to the smallpox vaccine and doesn't want it. At that time, the penalty for not taking that vaccine, which was, again, designed to stop the spread of smallpox, was a fine, about $5, about $150 in today's dollars. And that was the penalty. Jacobson didn't say, we get to take your livelihood. And by the way, your medical license, doctor, we get to stop you from practicing, medicine. The police power of the state was confirmed under Jacobson for public health measures with specific regard to that smallpox vaccine. And so that is over 100, and you do the math. There are two attorneys, who can do math, and I'm not one of them. This is hundreds of years precedent that says that the state can come in for the public good and require vaccination. The problem is today, in fact, I was starting to think, what other things did they think in 1905 were a good idea that we need to talk about now? The problem today is that Jacobson is being used over and over and over to say, number one, you can always mandate a vaccine when in fact these mRNA injections were not in any way a vaccine. Number two, Ninth Circuit en banc panel just said, well, it doesn't matter if, like in Jacobson, it doesn't matter if it stopped the spread of anything. It only matters what the mandators thought it might do, and that they thought it might be good for you people. This is an extremely dangerous application of Jacobson. Number one, it's an extremely dangerous ruling. This is Leslie Manukian's Health Freedom Defense Fund case, and we had gotten a great reversal with a 3-judge panel of the Ninth Circuit saying, nope, LA Unified has a much higher standard to meet about why they mandated it for those employees. And the en banc panel just overturned that, basically saying, no, whatever they think is in the public good, that's going to fly under Jacobson. And this is actually ripe for Supreme Court review right now. So I would like to see Jacobson revisited, because it's high time that a 1905 standard about medical knowledge back then is stops being applied in 2025.
Yeah, hopefully. I know Gorsuch wrote something, as you know, about that in one opinion, where he suggested that Jacobson was kind of limited, and that it's been, it's been expanded beyond its means. So, I mean, he did say that, but the question is, the problem with the Supreme Court on all of this stuff is they're missing a vote. I mean, in a lot of these cases, all the religious exemption cases, you got 3 votes for cert, in the First and the Second Circuit, but they don't have a 4th vote. And that's and I have to, my gut tells me they're really going to be missing that 4th vote on Jacobson, until, the way I look at it is, and I've tried to get around Jacobson in my UC case when we went after the UC for the flu vaccine in 2020, and RFK Jr. was co-counsel with me on that case. He brought the case to me. I think it's not Jacobson only. It zoomed in 25 that applied it to school, and it's every case, including the SD California judge, which is the federal judge, who did the first SB 227 case. It's every single case.
Oh, yeah, that was
Stabenow, whatever his name.
That was if you're talking about in the Southern District, that was Dana Sabraw.
Yeah, Sabraw, right.
Yeah, and Judge Sabraw denied our preliminary injunction at that time, and to fight the constitutionality of SB 277, and that's what killed that. That was the one case back then that had legs, I think, to undo SB 277, but nobody was ready for it, and he wasn't ready for it.
Well, and then there were another federal case, another state case by Brad Halakha or something like that. So Halakha, he did the state case. So, I mean, there have been 4 cases like that. I'm kind of a crusty old practical guy. I think I'll tell you the same thing I told PIC in 2019. You need to change the context, the milieu. And I think one thing that can do it is going to be this panel. If the panel comes, if this ACIP panel does what I think it's going to do, I think that's going to game change it. But until that time, in this UC case we kind of lost the battle but won the war. At oral argument, the state court judge in Oakland, we tried to say that, declared that the flu vaccine mandate by the UC was unconstitutional because this is during COVID. This is not COVID. I mean, how can you mandate a vaccine? I mean, it's even worse than Jacobson. I mean, imagine, there's smallpox, and I don't know that there was a second vaccine, but suppose there was a vaccine for, something else, and they say, well, why don't you take the other vaccine? Because the rationale was because, well, we don't want to fill up the hospitals with flu patients. So we made that argument, and the judge looked at me, and one right after another, he made 2 comments to me. And first thing he says, Mr. Jaffe, I wouldn't feel comfortable being in a movie theater with a person who wasn't vaccinated against the flu. And that's like that shows you the personal feeling about this. And then when I pushed back from him and told him it's kind of ridiculous, which maybe I shouldn't have said, says, Mr. Jaffe, you guys are like drunks, and you insist on driving a car, but you're drunk, and I'm not going to let a drunk driver drive. And that's literally what he told me.
Yeah, that That's where you see that religion coming through. That's where you see these personal biases coming through. And by the way, we have to stop calling the COVID shots a vaccine. Unfortunately, the word is just littering all of the jurisprudence now. It's in all the cases. It was never a vaccine. It never stopped infection or transmission. And it literally is an investigational drug with emergency use authority and no legal indication whatsoever to treat or prevent a disease at all. So unfortunately, that word vaccine, they did it on purpose.
Right.
They put it in the title with a capital V so that those products could be called a vaccine, capital V, but that isn't what they are. And yet the word is blinding the judges. I see it in case after case.
Well, it's also, I think it's a residual of the fear. I mean, I remember, I mean, I'm sure everyone remembers, I mean, we were wiping down grocery products.
Pizza boxes.
Raisin Bran boxes. We were wiping down, boxes for months in gloves.
And then where did that go, right? Where did that go? That suddenly just faded away, just like the
George,
6-foot distance just sort of appeared, said Fauci.
That was all George Floyd. That was all the protests. As soon as the protest came out, we found a bigger bad guy than the disease. And if you wanted to go out and protest, that was okay. You can't go to church, but you can go out and scream in the face of a complete stranger, and that's safe. And that was frankly that complete role reversal there of medical professionals is what woke me up. I was like, wait a minute, these people are idiots.
A lot of awakening moments for sure. That's a silver lining of the COVID era and the George Floyd era.
I, again, just as a lawyer with, a fairly long line of experience in this stuff, I mean, I kind of feel that on some level, it's time for people in common sense to take power away from these people.
Yes.
And I think this COVID thing, to me, the idiocy, just the abject stupidity of it is a piece just re-recommending the COVID shot for infants. Like in this day and age, I think if you talk to any normal person, right? I mean, even people that might want to take the shot and every booster themselves, some of these normal people might say, really? A child? And they don't even necessarily know that it's never been proven to have a clinical benefit. So I'm wondering if this isn't the start, because it's created such an irrational backlash, in the AAP, from the AAP, whether this isn't a part of the picture too. I mean, I think we ought to broadcast that. I mean, it's just crazy. Yeah. So, between that and hopefully this MIT guy is going to do this study in 3 or 4 months, and he's going to put all these pieces together. And then I think we're going to have a day of reckoning.
I think it's here, especially with your lawsuit. Thank you for filing it. Thank you for doing all the work to winnow it down from the 100 pages it must have started.
Right. And it was a far different thing back in June 1 on version 20 than it is on version 100.
It is a lean, mean fighting machine at this point.
Well, thank you so much. It means a lot coming from you.
Well,
you're like it in California. So I thank you.
Oh, thank you, Rick.
I'm very eager to follow this as it goes, Rick. Good luck with everything. And just so everybody knows, you can go to givesandgo.com/shared decision making for vaccine, and you can donate to Rick's fight. Everybody needs money, but this is a fight that has legs and could leave a big bruise if we're lucky. Rick, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I think we got it. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, Jennifer. Thank you as always.
Thank you
for your loveliness, your talented abilities, and of course your incredible intellect.
Thank you so much. My pleasure to be here. It's a great conversation.
Here.
Right. We'll see you guys soon, and be sure to join us next Monday with me and Warner, and hopefully Warner, and hopefully me. We'll see. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you, Rick.
I believe in the Constitution. I believe that one case, the right case, can change the world. If you believe this too, Freedom Counsel is for you. Pursuing a major case can be overwhelming, but we provide a community of practice so that you have the resources available to support your case. My name is Warner Mendenhall, and we are Freedom Counsel. Join Freedom Counsel today. Freedom Counsel